to start is to ask you first to briefly describe what the Sedona Method is. Bob?
Well, the Sedona Method is something that's simple. I think that's the first thing that I'd like people to know. And it's something that's natural and something that's spontaneous. If you watch little kids play, you'll see them switch from one emotion, perhaps anger, sadness, or fear, to another one instantaneously almost. They'll go from one feeling to another and then back again. They're playing with someone they were mad at. The method is a way that we re-experience that way we dealt with it in childhood. We identify the feeling and then we release it so that when we check back inside, it's gone. And that's the beautiful part of it. It's something all of us have done. It's something that people find it easy to learn on course. And the thing some people would like to know is, well, what does it feel like? And I often ask people to remember a time that they've been, for example, in a big parking lot in a city, maybe one with several levels. They've lost their car. Can't remember whether it was in the H's or the I's. They look around, they get more and more upset, frustrated, and finally, after 5 minutes of getting more and more tense or worried about it, another car pulls out. They see their car. That feeling of release, of relief, is what the method teaches us to do.
You know, both of you, Bob, yourself, practiced medicine for 20 years before becoming involved, I think, full-time with the Sedona Method as a teacher. And you, David, you were located in at the pinnacle of the medical profession, being known as the father of orthomolecular psychiatry and co-authoring the classic text with Linus Pauling. How is it that you became involved with this method and now find yourself living in Sedona, Arizona, far away from the pinnacles of fame that you once knew?
Well, I found a method that was more effective than psychoanalysis, which I'd also done for some years, more effective than any form of therapy. The releasing method, for instance, allows you to come out of a feeling that may have plagued you for 20 years in an instant. You can accomplish things in moments that would take months or years in therapy. And I've always searched for something to relieve human suffering. That's how I got into orthomolecular psychiatry. Everything I've ever done has been sort of geared in that direction. I never saw a more effective method than this in relieving human suffering instantly. And I've done most of the consciousness programs around. This I found to be the purest. In other words, it's a very simple technique. And what Lester discovered that was amazing was...
You're referring to the founder, the creator?
The founder, yeah. And that there's another method that psychiatry had not found of handling feelings, and that is releasing them. See, Anna Freud, in her book on the ego and the methods of defense, we all know that repression and suppression and displacement, all these common ways of handling feelings. But what Lester came upon was that these feelings can be released. In other words, as the energy, the suppressed energy comes up, the feeling is released instantly, as fast as that. So that you can be angry at somebody for 20 years and mulling it around with guilt and trying to forgive and going through all your mental processes. And the instant you release it, it's gone. And it works just marvelously. The amount of fear, for instance, that it releases, fear being like Jampolsky in Course in Miracles says there's only two emotions, love and fear. Anyway, just as I noticed walking up to the Grand Canyon, at one time I had such a fear of heights I wouldn't get within a block of the Grand Canyon. And now I can sit on the edge and look over. I mean, that was a lifetime fear. I mean, it was more than a fear, it was a terror. And I can sit on the edge of the Grand Canyon, look down happily, swinging my feet. So anything that can release that intense fear of that many years' duration in a few instants. Must be a powerful technique.
Do you recall when you first came in touch with the method?
I think it was 76 or 77. I'd already done EST and a number of other things. And somebody told me that this was far and beyond anything that they had seen or tried. Well, I've been a student of Zen for many years, and Buddhism in general. So when I heard it was a method that releases you from your attachments, well, that's all you need, of course, to go the whole route. You can release yourself from your attachments, then the end is certain. So as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, fantastic. You know, the Buddha said the cause of all suffering is attachments. So if there was a method that instantaneously releases you, that's just what I wanted. So I went right for it. And I found it worked instantly. The very first day they teach you the method, so I naturally experimented with it. I remember at the time I went to learn the course, I had a surgical condition for which I was scheduled for surgery on a Friday. A structural change of the body that requires nothing but surgery. No medical thing could have helped it. And by the time I finished the weekend, it was gone. Canceled the surgery, never had it back. I said, wow, this is something.
It's quite a testimonial.
Yes.
Really.
That was my first experience. And of course, at that time, I had many stress-related illnesses. I had duodenal ulcer and diverticulitis and migraine headaches and many allergies, and they were all cured instantly. Diverticulitis is gone, ulcer's gone, all the allergies gone, fear of heights is gone. I found I could cure anything in the body. I remember a year ago I broke my foot in November, and by Christmas I was dancing in the disco. And I really demonstrated that the body does what the mind believes. So, for instance, I can stop bleeding in an instant. If I cut myself, it instantly stops bleeding. I walk through poison ivy. So just releasing on these programs that we have is what frees us.
Bob, do you recall your first contact with the method?
The first contact I had was about 2 years ago. And at that time, I'd been in private practice. I'd taught neurology for about 7 or 8 years before that. I'd been in private practice for about 2 years, for about 6 months, and two close friends of mine became quite ill. I had thought I was pretty much in control of things, but the impact of illness and those close to me, whom I was taking care of, made me realize that there was something missing. And a friend of mine told me about the method. I took it, and I found that I was able to take my insecurities, my feeling uncomfortable in this two difficult situations, and release them so I could be much more of service to those people. I could feel better. I could maintain an objective, still care for them, but maintain a more detached attitude. And as I did it more and more, I felt better than I'd ever been able to feel before. I realized as I compared using the method with what I was able to do in my practice, that using the method to give to people, I was able to give them something that they could use for themselves. In my practice, I'd tried to do that. I would ask people, and I'd started early when I was in medicine. I realized that what I'd been taught in medical school was only the smallest part of the tip of the iceberg. I had been taught, as a matter of fact, I realized and I knew at the time, I was being taught lots and lots about the most esoteric, arcane, special illnesses. So I was an expert on those things. But as I got into seeing what was really the problem with people, I saw that those illnesses were extremely rare, and that the common things I really had never been taught anything about. Back pain, headaches, muscle tightness, various things that all of us go through, but in medical school there's very little taught. And most doctors, I think, are at a loss to deal with these problems. They can see there's some emotional component, but just how to deal with it is left up to, physical therapists, perhaps use of massage, Valium, drugs like that. Well, I could see that those things were very important because most of the patients I saw either had them or, in response to a serious illness, their emotional reaction was so crippling that it made their ability to deal with the illness very much impaired. And I saw that as they were able, when I saw patients who were able to deal more easily with this, when they could become calmer, things worked out better. So I saw that what I needed to do was to find a way that I could give to people that they could use for themselves, that they didn't need to come back to me. They could be their own doctor and their own patient. And I started teaching the method about 6 months after I took it. I saw it was so powerful. And I continued to practice for about a year. And about a year ago, I stopped because I saw that what I could do with this method was so much more effective. I just had someone, as a neurologist, one of the problems I used to see commonly was headache, neck pain, and so forth, and whiplash injuries were particularly troublesome. And there was a person on course 2 weeks ago who had fallen off his bicycle about a year ago, had constant pain in his neck and upper chest since that time, had gone through all sorts of treatment but hadn't really gotten better. And by using the method for only 5 days, he came into class the second weekend and said, I feel a little incredulous, I feel a little uncomfortable about telling you this, but I used the method, I released, and the pain at first would get less, and as soon as I'd release the pain, I'd start to feel afraid. Then I'd release the fear feeling, pain would come back a little bit, I'd release that, more fear would come, I'd release the fear, and gradually both the pain and the fear went away. And now I don't have any pain. I feel normal again. That kind of experience I have seen over and over and over again. I never saw it in medicine. I know that giving people drugs that depress them simply helps them to suppress those feelings. And a whiplash is a good example. I'd seen lots and lots of people with it and was amazed that they couldn't get better. But then I began to see what the problem was. When we have a shock to the body, our muscles tighten up to protect us. We think that we need to have the tightness, which produces pain, in order to continue to be protected. So as soon as the tightness goes away, the fear comes up, and that will keep us unable to let go of the tightness. So by working on both at once, this person was able, as a lot of other people have with similar things, to let go of the whole thing and feel well. So it's been some.
I'm speaking with Robert Scott and David Hawkins. We're exploring the Sedona Method. We'll be right back. You've been talking about the simplicity of the technique, of the method itself, and I'm wondering how you would compare the technique or the method with other approaches to changing one's consciousness or raising one's consciousness. I think of things like the S training, actualizations, LifeSpring, and such programs as that. How would you compare the Sedona Method with those programs?
Well, those programs, first of all, you need a method to release the old programs. And any of the consciousness programs that put in new programs are weakened by the fact that they're canceled out by thousands of old programs that negate it. And these programs are subsumed under a feeling. In other words, the simplicity of this method and the reason for its rapidity of effect is that it's dealing with repressed feelings, suppressed feelings, and the energies are released as they come up. Now, one feeling may be associated with millions of thoughts, so that consciousness programs dealing with thought are very weak and slow by comparison. In other words, one feeling represents the cumulative effect of millions of thoughts, and as you release that one feeling, you literally wipe out the millions of thoughts associated with that one feeling.
But in something like, David, in something like EST, or particularly EST, I think of, frequently people will come up with suppressed feelings.
They do, yes, but not in a predictable way and not continuous. See, the method works continuously. So that if something should happen in the studio, let's say, and fear would arise, as the fear came up, it's instantly released. So you're not accumulating any more programs. you're constantly releasing what you've suppressed, not only this lifetime, but whatever you came into this life with. So many of the programs that you're releasing, of course, are millions of years old, really, many, many lifetimes. And all these feelings have to do with survival, really. The lower self, the ego, all is subsumed under that term, are really all the programs we've accumulated to ensure our survival, to keep us separate, to keep us thinking that we're bodies. And as these programs are released, who you really are becomes increasingly apparent until you really experience just your own beingness. And in your own beingness, you see your own perfection and that of others.
One might interpret what you just said as kind of releasing the mind or getting rid of thoughts, and the lurking danger of brainwashing comes up. How would you respond to that question?
It unbrainwashes, it unprograms. In other words, this method has no new programs. There's no metaphysical teachings. There's no new programs at all. It's an unprogramming technique. And what happens is the mind becomes quieter and quieter. See, because thoughts are created by a suppressed feeling. And the way to wipe out thoughts is you watch a train of thoughts and you look for the feeling that's triggering this train of thoughts. And as you release the feeling, that train of thoughts disappears, so that eventually the mind becomes silent. And in this silent beingness state, one just knows. And thoughts are not necessary. The man is so used to thoughts and feelings, he thinks that's normal. In fact, thoughts disappear, and as emotions are constantly released, they begin to disappear as well. And then you're in a state of peace and imperturbable calm at all times, in which everything is just known.
When one experiences this and then one moves back into one's everyday life, how does one integrate this non-thinking beingness with the practical problems one comes in touch with in one's job or family life?
It continues as you walk about in the world. The beauty of the method is that it's working all the time as you go about in the world. In fact, it's recommended that you stay in the world, because in the world is what's bringing up your programs. And to isolate yourself on a mountaintop, you can get above your garbage, and of course you're feeling great and you think you're in a fantastic space until you go back into the world and all the garbage comes up again. So it's recommended with those who've learned the method to stay in the world, because the world is bringing up your garbage for you to release.
I think in line with the question that you asked about other methods of doing things, that this is, everyone has had different kinds of experiences, perhaps starting with a beautiful experience of nature when we were little, or listening to music or something like that. And the question that goes for practically every kind of discipline or path that we follow, and we spend a lot of time trying to recapture that moment, to recapture the feeling, and we're dealing with something that happens in an isolated moment in time. What we're really concerned about with our life is every day, every moment of every day. And if you try and spend that moment remembering what it felt like when you heard a Haydn Mass or played music with someone else and enjoyed it, it's frustrating because it happened in the past. What the method allows people to do, and I think that that's why it's different from everything else, is to take the feeling that you have at the moment, to release that feeling or feelings until you get to a point of feeling comfortable, calm, and peaceful, so that whatever is happening in the world, you inside are in that imperturbable state. You can, as David says, you can get away from things. If you look at the problems of the world and the way we attempt to deal with them, you can see that a situation, for example, like a job or a relationship, might be the source of stress, might appear to be, or discomfort. And yet when you look at it a little harder in perspective, you see that at times it's quite pleasant. At other times it's stressful, so it's not in the situation itself. It's clear it's our response to it. Now, our response is going on 24 hours a day. And in order to be effective, any method, it seems to me, needs to be able to be available and work at any moment of the day. So if you look at how do we deal with these problem situations, well, we may try and get away from them. That's the most common way of handling a feeling. Something awkward comes up, we want to move away. We leave the room, or we leave the job, or we leave the person. But frequently, as often as not, the same problem comes up with the next job, or the next person, or the next situation. Another, and perhaps actually more frequent, really, way to deal with a feeling is to suppress it. We'll become aware of a feeling of dislike for someone that we have to spend time with. And we'll push the feeling out of the way because in order to work smoothly with another person, we can't have that feeling of irritation or anger or annoyance. The difficulty is that the feeling is still there. And the harder we push down, the tighter and more compressed the feeling is, the more it wants to get back up. So the upshot of it is that as people get older and accumulate more and more feelings, they feel tired, more tired, have less energy, feel more tense, feel more under the gun, feel they have to move faster, and become more rushed. And the end result is that those suppressed feelings, which have accumulated, run us instead of our being able to be in control of them. So we say that the simplest way to deal with it, every moment of every day, is to take the feeling. What is the feeling? Is it a feeling I could release? Do I need it now? Or would it be more constructive in this situation to have another feeling? So it gives the person control at each moment. And I think that's one of the major differences between this and practically anything else. You don't have to go away to do it. It isn't something you have to come back to a person who can help you with it. Once you learn it in the course, it's yours. And we encourage people as we teach it to learn it their own way, see the ways they can integrate it into their life. And that, of course, depends on what they do.
Though there's no philosophy as such associated with the method, what happens to people? I mean, I'm sure that the kind of experience you're describing obviously changes people's perception of the world around them, and that has to involve their approach to dealing with the world. So what about that? What happens to those people who experience the method from the standpoint of their own personal philosophy?
Well, the method is experiential. It's not intellectual. And what it gets rid of is anger, grief, fear, lust, anger, pride. Takes you up to courage, then to acceptance.
The deadly sins.
Takes you up to love and finally to peace.
I see.
And
so Christ was teaching the Sedona Method.
He didn't tell you the technique. He told you to forgive your brother, but he didn't tell you exactly how to do that, how to let it go.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it?
You see, what all the methods are not telling you is how to let it go. And what he says is so, but he doesn't tell you how to do it. So you can struggle a lifetime, let's say, to achieve one forgiveness, which when you know an effective method can be released in a matter of seconds or minutes. And so we feel that, or I've observed that the method allows anybody to achieve whatever their spiritual goals may be. If you're a Mormon, you're going to become a better Mormon. If you're a Catholic, you're going to be a better Catholic. Whatever religious or spiritual or consciousness goal you have, you see, if we could be at the end instantly if it weren't for the attachments and the programs that are standing in the way. So if we knew a method to release them, we would, achieve our goal instantly. So the beauty of the method is it allows you to get wherever you want to go. It removes all the barriers.
Is the answer in the method, or is the answer in the person experiencing it?
You have to first want to let go of all your garbage. Otherwise the method wouldn't appeal to you. I mean, if you're still enjoying, anger, fear, grief, and all those things, then it wouldn't appeal to you. But if you've reached that point in life when you want life to become better, this is a technique that will take you out of all that misery, and it does it rapidly. And you don't have to read anything about metaphysics or any such things. The truth of all the world's teachings become your own experience. And in fact, it's advised not to read. I haven't read anything in a long time now. In other words, there's no point in contaminating yourself with further programs. Every spiritual book you read has to be released later. Every sentence that you've studied, memorized, and has to be let go of. Every single thing spoken in words is a program.
How do you avoid?
Everyone is a limitation.
How do you avoid that becoming a program?
The technique itself.
How do you avoid what you're just saying from becoming a program? That I've got to release all these things.
Experientially, you find it so. Experientially, you find that every teaching is a limitation. It has to be, because what speaks words but one's ego? Consequently, they're all programs. However, there's good programs and bad programs, you might say. And as you get higher and higher within the illusion, finally you start letting, it's like you get up the ladder, then you pull the ladder up after you. So right now I'm in the process of pulling the ladder up after me, letting go all the stuff that I learned over the years.
You asked the question of what people do with it, and obviously people do with it what they want to. That's the purpose of this course. We say for you to take the method and use it for what you want. We don't have any direction for people to go in. As David mentioned, we see that most of our feelings can be put into the categories, starting with the lowest one in terms of energy level, of apathy. And that's the feeling we don't feel we can do anything. Why bother anyway? Can't fight City Hall. Next up the line is a feeling of grief, of sadness, of disappointment. And there's a little more energy in that. When we come to fear, which is still a bit higher, there's a feeling of, I better perhaps get ready to move because it looks dangerous here. And above that is a feeling of lust, of desiring, of wanting to. And that serves as sort of a bridge between these lower feelings in which we really don't have much energy, not much of anything available to do anything, to go up even higher in terms of available energy to do what we do want to do. So next comes anger. That has a lot of force behind it. People get things done in anger. Pride above that is a state where people who have done things come back into, well, I did it, that's pretty good. But the feeling there is, well, I'm not so sure I could do it the next time, so maybe I won't try. Now, above those are the three highest states that we can attain, and courageousness is the most active one of those, the feeling that I can do it. It's possible. And with that is a feeling of confidence, of openness, of flexibility. And above that is a feeling of acceptance, of joyfulness, of radiance, of feeling intense pleasure. And finally, as David mentioned, a feeling of peace in which all is quiet. Now, in the course, we go through those feelings, and people see, oh yeah, I have a feeling of apathy about this. With my relationship with my wife, I feel some irritation because I don't feel I'm getting really what I want, or there's something missing. Or perhaps I feel some irritation with myself. And what people do during the course is to spot those feelings, to release them, and then they take whatever direction they want. For example, at the beginning of the course, we ask people what they want to get. Some people want to improve a relationship, other people want to change jobs or feel more competent, successful in what they're doing. And that's really up to them. The course really helps them get on course by releasing towards whatever way they want to go. Ultimately, we're talking about freedom from all the feelings that block us, that impede us from getting what we want. So it's been used by people in all walks of life.
So, I'm speaking with Dr. Robert Scott, Dr. David Hawkins. We're talking about the Sedona Method. I was saying as we were listening to John Denver sing that song, It's Up to You, that I can feel all those listeners out there coming closer to the radio and saying, okay, tell us, how do you do it? How do you do it? David, how do you do it?
The method is an internal intention set, I call it. A willingness to let things go, and the actual details of the technique is taught in a course. The reason it's taught in a course is because it sounds so simple, and it is so simple, that the ego would like to just grab it and therefore get rid of it. be sort of like telling somebody who still had a drinking problem that the secret of AA is you just stay away from one drink one day at a time. The guy'd say, "Hey, I know that. What the heck good is that?" And that would be the end of it, right? The reason AA works is because people learn the techniques in an overall setting, in an overall context. And those are found through experience. That a 30-hour course, during the course, the person is taken through so many releases that the ego can no longer destroy the effectiveness of the method. And once you learn and experience it, then it becomes part of you.
That response, David, is hauntingly familiar to the response frequently given when someone asks about EST.
Mm-hmm.
That, well, we create this context called
Well, EST is a complicated series of programs. It was the most complicated experience I ever had, in which they throw everything at you but the kitchen sink. Now, this method is one very simple technique, so simple that, that like Zen, it's before your nose, and being at the end of your nose, it's impossible to see. It's so close, it's that close.
Bob, as a teacher of the method, would you like to describe actually what happens in the course?
Sure. I mentioned earlier when you asked what do people do with it and what do people get from it. People get from it what they want, and they start using that as a fulcrum. What do I want? Using that as a motivator, as a goal that underlies the course. We start off the first day by looking at those things that people want overall as something that they would be willing to release feelings that get in the way to get. For example, we assume and ask people to see that that's the case, that what they'd like to do as a result of taking the course is to feel lighter, happier, freer, more able, confident, and so forth. So they take the things they want, and the very first day we talk a little bit about the various ways of handling a feeling, suppressing the feeling, trying to get away from it by escaping it, expressing the feeling, getting mad at another person, for example, which is fine for us. It lets off some of the steam, but the other person doesn't enjoy it particularly. And then the fourth way of handling a feeling, which is to release it. So we spend the first part talking about how we deal with these feelings that cause the problems every day. And then, after people can see that, yes, I've expressed feelings, I know for a long time I suppressed them and it felt awful. When I began to express myself, I felt freer, but still I felt uncomfortable every time I let somebody else have it or blew my stack. Or if I really threw something, I felt foolish afterwards. Then as they see that those other things that they've done to deal with the feeling have not worked particularly well and have left them really in the same state that they were before, then they are willing to try something new, and that is the method. So we start early on, very simply, asking them to look at what feeling they have. And oftentimes people, when they first start the course, are a little bit nervous or a little uncomfortable or unsure, or what is this all, or what are they going to do, or what do I have to do? So we start with a simple feeling like that, and by leading them through a release, by asking a few simple questions. And I don't tell people what the questions are, because as David said, it sounds so simple that frequently people will say, well, I already understand that, I don't need that. But it takes people a while, and I ask people at the end of the first day not to tell their friends what the method is. And I've learned that it's easier for them to do that when they look back at the first part of the day and see, well, it was a little confusing to start with. Because what we're helping people learn how to do is the exact opposite from the way they've always dealt with the feelings. We've taken a feeling, we've noticed that we're uncomfortable. What do we try and do? Well, we push at that uncomfortable feeling. We want to get it out of there. And if it won't go, then we're going to get the other direction. So we, for example, feel, what are they going to do? Or what do I have to do? So we start with a simple feeling like that. And by leading them through a release, by asking a few simple questions. And I don't tell people what the questions are, because as David said, it sounds so simple that frequently people will say, well, I already understand that, I don't need that. But it takes people a while, and I ask people at the end of the first day not to tell their friends what the method is. And I've learned that it's easier for them to do that when they look back at the first part of the day and see, well, it was a little confusing to start with. Because what we're helping people learn how to do is the exact opposite from the way they've always dealt with the feelings. We've taken a feeling, we've noticed that we're uncomfortable. What do we try and do? Well, we push at that uncomfortable feeling. We want to get it out of there. And if it won't go, then we're going to get the other direction. So we, for example, feel uncomfortable in a situation, we'll try and get away from it. But the problem is every time we come back into that or a similar situation, the same feelings come up. Finally, we get the point. The feelings are the problem. They're my feelings. I've got to do something about it. And when they see that, then it's easy. Then they're eager to do it because they'll take a feeling that they have had perhaps multiple times before. They release it and they look inside. It's completely experiential. I asked them to use the scientific method. Don't take my word for it. Take the feeling, release it, and then check inside and see how you feel. Well, they'll say, well, I still feel a little wobbly. Okay, well, would you like to release on that wobbly feeling again? They say, yeah. They do it. I say, well, how does it feel now? Well, gosh, I feel a lot more relaxed, but there's still a little tiny bit. I said, well, would you like to release that? They say, sure. And then they release that. Or if they want to, they say, well, I've had about enough for now. I feel a little confused. I'll say, okay, you can leave it at that for the moment. Or if you'd like to, you can release the confused feeling. What would you like to do? The way the Course is taught is it's left up to them. It's always in their control. It's their choice. Do you want to release or not? It's up to you. And I think that, again, differentiates this Course from almost everything else. There is no pressure, there's no coercion, there's no force. It's up to the people. They take whatever feeling they want to release. It's not my telling them that they should release the feeling. They make the decision, and it is a conscious decision. So it's easy. By the end of the first day, everybody's able to do it. And then we keep, on the second day and later days, keep polishing it. Apply the method to feelings that are more charged emotionally, let's say, or situations that have been difficult. So we start simply. Start with the very simple feelings. The feeling you have right now is the one you work with. So it's not complicated. You don't have to use any complicated system. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to figure out where the feeling came from, who was responsible for it. You just say, well, this is the feeling. And that's all. Would I like to release it?
There's no conscious review of one's past life? Past experience?
No, you don't need to. As you release, frequently as you get in touch with the feeling, a scene from childhood may come up, or another scene. But those are really unimportant, because the feeling, every feeling we have, is the result of thousands of episodes in the past. How many times when we were a kid was our toy taken away from us, or did we have to go to bed early? Not stay up and listen to the radio or the television. Those feelings, every one of those accumulated brings us to the feeling we have now. If someone takes something away from us, or we don't get what we want, so you don't have to go back to each incident, and that's why it's so rapid, it's so fast. You take, with one feeling, you just keep releasing on that feeling until it either goes away completely, as David has mentioned. A lot of people, after the Course, the man with the whiplash, his pain went away completely. Another man who was a marathoner had Achilles Tendonitis. He'd been running marathons 7 years. Every time his foot hit the ground, it hurt. He released, pain would go away for an instant. Hit the ground again, pain, release, pain is gone for an instant. He kept doing it with persistence. Within 4 or 5 weeks after the Course, I talked to him on the telephone. He said, the pain is gone. So he didn't have it anymore. So it's the teaching of the method is experiential, and it is scientific in that each person uses it for himself. Do you still have the feeling? Yes or no? Then they check for themselves. It's up to them. So that's the beauty of it. You don't have to, nobody tells you what to do or how to do it. It's up to you.
We have a brief tape of the founder, the creator of the method, Lester Levinson, talking about how that came about. Perhaps before we play that tape, each of you, perhaps David, describe your experience of Lester Levinson.
Lester, as I said, I was a student of Buddhism and Zen for many years. When I met Lester, I heard he was nobody and looked like nobody. And when I met him, he looked like nobody. A true sage. There was no trappings, no robes, no incense, nobody genuflecting, no mobs of people chanting mantras, nobody swaying in a hypnotic ecstasy. Just an ordinary person you would pass on the street. And it's only when you speak to him and he realizes your degree of interest and he sort of opens up to you that you realize you're talking to a very incredible being who's aware of who he is, and he's aware of who you are. And he won't play the role of the guru. You are constantly thrown back on yourself. He says, well, you are the one that wants to go free, and you know how to get free. And therefore, just do it. So we all want a guru that will do it for us, that'll get us high and keep us high. And we like to hang out in his ashram so we can stay up in the dizzying heights. But it has to work in the world. It has to work in Times Square. It's got to work as you're going to work. It has to work in every moment of every day.
Bob, what is your experience of Lester?
Well, it's funny. He's unlike anybody I'd ever met before. As David says, he's someone, if were you to see him on the street, you would think him very ordinary. And he is. He's a very simple person. After he learned the method, he made a lot of money in real estate and then gave that money away, moving from New York City, where he lived and worked, out to Arizona, and he lived a very simple life. His life now, he's now in Arizona, but spent the last 5 years in New York getting the method out. So he's someone who works tirelessly. He spends 18 hours a day doing things. He's very gentle, very simple, very direct, straightforward. The way he works is really to let people do it themselves and not to interfere. As David says, he makes it quite clear that it's up to you.
Let's hear from Lester Levinson, the creator of the Sedona Method.
I started life like everyone else, trying to do things the right way. Having been graduated a physicist, things being very difficult in the 30s. I was graduated in 1931 from Rutgers University. I probed many things, not only in physics and engineering, but I even went into business. I thought, well, the scientific world is not making me happy. I'll try the business world. In the process of trying so hard, as the years went by, I got sick. I had migraine headache, I had ulcers, and the usual things that come from business pressures. I was trying to make it in the world like everyone should, be a good person, make a lot of money. And I started out at a difficult time in 1931. Physicists were considered necessary evils. Engineers weren't appreciated too much because they didn't bring in profits like the salesmen did. And so I shifted over from engineering into business, back into engineering into business. I did a lot of research and development work and found it interesting, but I was always changing. I knew not why. As the years went by, I began to get ill. I began to get the usual businessman's pressure diseases. I got ulcers. I had 4 perforated ulcers. I developed migraine headache. And finally, after 20 or so years, I ended up with 2 coronary thromboses. After the second one, I was told not to move. I might die any minute, any day. I had been a workaholic. I had been driving, and when I heard that, I said, wow. Up until that time, there was something missing in life. I never felt fulfilled. I did have nice jobs. I was able to make money. In fact, when my crisis came, it was 1952, I was living on Central Park South. When I was
in New York City.
New York City. When I was told not to exercise, not even to take a step up, because I might die. Well, that scared me to death. Up until that time, I had been seeking fulfillment. What is life? I had studied back in the 20s Watson's behaviorism, which was the thing of those days. And in the 30s, I shifted into Freud, and Freud was my god in those days. And with all this accumulated knowledge, I even had 4 years of psychoanalysis under an associate of Freud, a Dr. Killian Bloom, B-O-U-H-M. And after 4 years of psychoanalysis, 4 times a week, I was told some people cannot be helped. I would never stop seeking, pushing, driving, what's this all about? So when that second heart attack came, for me, it was the best thing that happened in my life. I needed that much of a push, of a shock, to make me realize that the smart boy I thought I was awfully dumb. Here he was, 43 years old, sitting on top of the world, being envied by everyone, and yet I had a foot and a half in the grave. On top of which I was miserable most of the time. So this second heart attack I take as the greatest blessing I've had in my life. It made me realize that all the accumulated knowledge up until that time was of no avail. Well, what should I do? Well, as a good physicist would do, you go back to the lab. I began thinking again. What am I? What's this world? What's my relationship to it? What is happiness? What is mind? What is intelligence? I say because of the intensity of my need and drive for the answer, they began to come. The first thing I thought of, what is it I want most? Happiness. Oh, happiness is being loved. And that was a shock to me. I was very much wanted. People liked me, family, friends, everyone. And it was quite a revelation to discover that being liked was not it. So I rethought, well, what is happiness? What are the happiest moments I can think of? And when I relived them, I saw that it was when I was loving that I was happiest. And that when people were loving me, there was a momentary pleasure there, but nothing lasting in it. So I immediately began trying to change all my thinking from wanting to be loved to loving, from wanting to be approved of to approving of things. And I discovered there was a help in it. I began to get better. Then I said, as a good scientist would, well, if this is good, I'm going to pursue this as far as it will go. After about a month of changing, wanting love to loving, I saw another thing that was almost like a shock, but it was a deep revelation. I wanted to change everything in this world. I was wanting things in the world to be different from the way they were. And that, I realized, made me a slave of everything in this world because I wanted it to be different. So I began letting go of wanting to change things. And what a revelation that was. As I did that, I began again to feel even better and better and better. I kept that going for, another 2 months with the letting go of wanting love and wanting approval and so forth. And at the end of a 3-month period, I suddenly discovered my health was back to normal. My heart was okay. My migraine was gone, and I felt good. I felt my ulcers had gone also, and I felt so good I never even went back to the doctor for a checkup. And the proof of that I did not need a doctor simply, that was back in 1952. And I can say truthfully, I have not seen a doctor professionally since 1952. Whereas before that, I was always with the specialists and the doctors. And so I know everything in my body straightened out. And what was the key thing? I was relaxed. All the pressures that were formerly there were gone. I was not pushing against this world. I was not trying to change it. I was not involved in a hassle with people of wanting them to approve and like me. And just by doing that, my whole life was at ease.
You were just listening to a tape of Lester Levinson talking about his experience of coming in touch with what is now called the Sedona Method. I'm talking with Dr. Robert Scott, neurologist and teacher of the Sedona Method, and Dr. David Hawkins, a psychiatrist and acknowledged father of orthomolecular psychiatry. We're going to continue our exploration of the Sedona Method in just a few minutes after we pause for station identification. You're listening to Voices and Visions. This is KALW FM in San Francisco.